This is Talk for Food, your portal into quantum possibility. I'm Adam Abraham. Each week, I'll be your guide on this expedition as we explore the near and far regions of this thing called life on Earth, through the heavens, and beyond. Talk for Food is brought to you by love, respect for all, and a vision of a safe, abundant, healthy, and peaceful world made possible by you and me.
And he kept pushing my finger back and forth. And he said, "What do you see?" And I said, "Nothing. There's just energy. It's just a bunch of whirling molecules in there and stuff." And he said, "That's right. That's energy. That's all you are, is energy. Your perception of anything else is erroneous. It doesn't exist. You are an energy being." And that, I understood what he was saying on a different level, but it was new to me that a scientist would be telling me that I'm just energy. And he says, being energy, you can't be created or destroyed. You go on forever. So the idea that you're anything different is erroneous.
We can't tell ourselves that too early or too often, and yet it seems as though we've forgotten, or maybe we just didn't know. But hello again, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Talk for Food, which comes to you over webtalkradio.net and iTunes and in video on YouTube with Adam Abraham as we journey into realms of quantum possibility. Started things out with the words of our guest and our topic and our conversation today. That's Ralph Ring. Ralph is a very he's a wonderful man. He's a wonderful example. And he's also very, I'm going to say this, everyone is special, but he has had a unique experience, very, very unique experience, because he had the occasion to work with a gentleman by the name of Otis T. Carr. In the 1950s, he, along with a group of engineers, designed what could be called a spaceship or a craft. You might call it a non-linear transportation vehicle. You might even call it multidimensional, because they built this craft and went on a journey. It was only a short one. It was only a journey of 10 miles. But Ralph and two engineers entered this craft. Its navigation system was tuned to a location 10 miles from their location. This was their test flight. And they tuned into a frequency and literally, in a twinkling of an eye, went there. The craft disappeared, if you will, and appeared at this place, and they came back. This was all in a span of about 10 minutes of elapsed time, 10 or 15 minutes, I think it was, elapsed time. But this was dimension breaking. I don't know if it wasn't groundbreaking. And it was to be a proposal for a new type of transportation vehicle, where today, if you remember, some of you don't remember the Jetsons, where they had their little vehicle, their space, and they were flying around through space and everything else. And, there was some roads for guidelines, but they were up in the air and stuff like that. This was that. This is what they created. And this is what was shut down. Ralph is, to my knowledge, the only surviving or one with us, so to speak, of those who went on that first, and as it turned out, only trip. Before they were planning to do a more widespread, in fact, they were planning to do a widespread introduction of this technology after being turned down or spurned by General Motors. They presented this to General Motors. This was in the 1950s, and they were rejected. Whoever the person that represented the company said that this would somehow upset, I think it was the world economy or something like that, or the monetary system. Well, that was the answer. That was the reason. Okay, I'm not going to get into the whys of that. But before they were going on, their next step was to just do this just directly. Let the public know. Let the world know that this is there. And before that happened, since you are not aware of any of this, that was shut down. People came in from, I don't know if it was the government or the secret government. They presented themselves with enough appearance of authority and force, a willingness to use it, to persuade everyone to stop what they were doing, while they carted everything away. And the vehicle was called the OTC X1, Otis T car X1. And I'm understanding, or I heard, that that vehicle was put in a place somewhere in New Mexico. I think their intention, the people who took it, their intention was to put weapons on it. And guess what? Weapons wouldn't work on this thing. In order for this to operate, you had to be of a certain, you might say, not a frame of mind. You needed to be of a certain state of being. And if you weren't of that state of being, it wasn't going to work. It would not work. And that state of being is at the crux of the human situation of today in 2013. What is our state of being? And is it natural, or is it, is it conventional? Because today, conventional state of being is harried, it's anxious, it's impatient, it's, what have you done for me lately? It's about it's being experts on what's not possible. That's an oxymoron right there, to be an expert on what is not possible. And yet we claim a great amount of what isn't possible, and being sure just because we ourselves haven't experienced it, and denouncing others as being whatever because they have experienced it and we haven't. Well, these are the issues of our life today, and Ralph and I are going to talk about it. This conversation, which we had in December of 2012, it was just before, a few weeks before the magical date of December 21st. And so we had a lot of that working in the backdrop, of the conversation. But you're going to get the beginning this today. And we're going to kind of continue as we go on. But I'll take a break right now, and then I'll do a little build up on the other side. And we will welcome Ralph Ring when Talk for Food returns with Adam Abraham. It's never too early, and it's never too often that you can teach a human being about who they are and what they are. And that is what I Am My Body Not does. We learn every minute, every moment of our life. But if we learn early that what we see is not who we are, we've got a shot at really focusing on where the true power of life is. And that's in our ideas, that's in our hopes, that's in our dreams, and that's in our love. When you love someone enough to buy I Am My Body Not and give it as a gift, you give them a treasure for a lifetime. You can find I Am My Body Not by visiting Philos.com. PHAELOS.com. First segment of Talk for Food gets started right here and now on webtalkradio.net with Adam Abraham. And before we begin our journey with Ralph Ring, I want to first of all just point your attention to and express my excitement for being, discovered by ascensionwithearth.com. It's a website I have watched, I monitor all the time because I love the information. I resonate with the information that they bring there. And it turns out they found me, and my first article or video, in fact, which was our last show, was featured on their site, and more material. You can look forward to seeing more material from Thought for Food, my blog at philosopher.com, and or the video and or audio of Talk for Food. We've got a video channel as well on YouTube. It's a Philosopher video channel. It's a video edition of the audio of Talk for Food, which people are getting on webtalkradio.net and on iTunes. So I'm really excited about that. Also, the issues of the day, the conversations. There was last week 40 years of Roe v. Wade, discussions about abortion rights versus right to life, and the click and clack of these groups. And we're going to get into some other click and clacks later on in this conversation today. But I just find it interesting, and I just need to say this, is that when people are positioning themselves as being champions of the unborn in terms of the right to life mentality, and this is kind of my it is an issue to some extent. I want to pull it up and bring it out, and I want to ask, where are they when it comes to sending our children, many of which are not even 20 years of age, and now this past week even women, to war? It's all right to fight for someone who hasn't come into the world, but after they've come in, now they're useful to be sent off to war to kill someone else. Where's the right for life of people who are born? Where is the love for innocent lives, innocent people? Not only the victims of war, but even the vanquishers, the ones who are wielding the guns. And you think about the men who are sending these children off to fight for their policies and their ways. And you ask yourself, is that really what you want? Do you really want to continue doing that? Because that's how the wheel of misfortune continues to turn, when we sit back and allow people to do things that in our heart we know are not right. At any rate, let us get started, because that is part of the beauty of this conversation with Ralph Ring. I've given some of the beginnings of it with his work with Otis Carr, and this show, this portion, this segment, in terms of the entire show and the content, is really going to be about the beginning, as Ralph talks about natural law and how this is all leading to meeting Otis Carr and the work that they eventually did. So here goes. Oh, and before we go, you're listening to Talk for Food on webtalkradio.net. I think I've talked long enough to say that now, with Adam Abraham, and we're going to go into Otis Carr and that whole conversation with Ralph Ring. I've told a few people that I was coming up, and I talked about the apparatus, the machine the technology that you developed with Otis Carr, was it in the 1950s, was it?
Yeah, late 50s and early 60s.
In early 60s. Wow, that was radical. Let's perhaps begin there, because you had a vision of a different world even then, that here now, 40, 50 years later, for some people it still seems to be a stretch. So let's talk about what that vision was and is.
Okay, well, I give you a little background on me. I was raised in the woods, basically. I was raised in Paradise, California, which is up in Northern California. And we walked 7 miles back and forth to school every day through the woods. So most of my basic education came from nature, because we were constantly playing with the bugs and the beetles and the hummingbirds and the bees and the ants. And there's a great deal to learn in a very, very fashionable and a very, very quick way if you let yourself do that. So when I came out of the woods eventually, came out into the other world that I didn't know too much about, everything seemed to be upside down and backwards. Nobody was operating, or very few were operating on natural laws. Everything seemed to be a synthetic laws that were created to create a system that would work for some but not all. A system of duality. In nature, there's you have a middle ground. You have a warm, and then you have graduation towards hot and graduation towards cold, but it's all one. It's all one.
It's a seamless whole, right?
Seamless, right. So when I got into the idea that they were operating in a dual system, a duality, when they were saying this is good and this is bad, this is right and this is wrong, this is up and this is down, I was really confused for a while. I mean, I just didn't know where I was. I thought I was in the wrong world. And I constantly wanted to go back to the woods. But I realized that everyone, without exception, is my relative. All the animals, all the bugs, all the beetles, all the blacks, the whites, the reds, the greens, all the colors, everything in life is a part of me, and I'm a part of that. So I realized I could show them the simple ways in nature how to do things that would overnight change their life and change all of our lives, that they would work for weeks and months and years on, that they'd never solve because they keep wanting to solve. They don't intend on solving anything. They keep wanting it. That's like a squirrel cage where things keep revolving instead of evolving.
Right, the gerbil that works and works and works and goes nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. So I I made a decision. I said, well, I must be here for a purpose, and that purpose must be to share with people what I've learned from nature. And there's enough of it to get them to the same state of mind that I maintain most of the time, which is comfortable, harmonious, comedic or whatever. And I decided that I would find ways and means to get everybody to feel as good as I do when I'm with nature. So I don't think it was I per se that set the goal. I think the composition of I, which is all of us, a collective consciousness, set the goal. And I coalesced with the goal to uplift the consciousness, to raise the sights of people, to go beyond the range that I apparently saw that was servitude in nature. They were working on ideas that they had to do something instead of just, they don't have to do anything but be who they are. But they said, they've told me, and I've watched and listened to people saying they have to go to work because they have to support their family and their kids and everything else.
Right, a sense of obligation
Yes.
To some outside authority or some outside expectation, as opposed to any type of personal desire or motivation, some heartfelt motivation.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So I set a goal. I'm a sovereign being of the multiverse. As a kid, I was pretty cocky about that, but I said, well, I'm here, and I'm going to have everybody to feel as good as I do or better, and I'll learn from them, and they'll learn from me. So I set a goal, and I wasn't sure how I was going to accomplish that at all, but I get some help on what I'm calling my intuition. Instead of listening to my brain, which seems to be a third-dimensional instrument, I listen to my intuition, which comes from a heartfelt feeling or a mind set above the brain, and a heart set that comes from infinity. And so I loved magnetism. When I was a kid, I learned a lot about magnetism. And I realized, whoa, we've got all the power of the multiverse right here, right in our hands. We've always had it. We've got just the four elements on simple terms: the wind, the fire, the earth, and the wind, the fire, the earth, and the water. But they're using them in such ways that they're building contraptions to build and sell us this, meters to measure this, and cause a tremendous burden on a person's income, or on a person's lifestyle, because we have to pay for these things. All these elements that are free, they're being charged for. And I said, that there's something that's not a good picture to me, because they're all free and we can use them freely. If we understand the laws of nature, levitation being one of them. Clouds. Yesterday here in Prescott, Arizona, the clouds were so thick and heavy with moisture that it rained for hours it didn't let up, with thousands and thousands of tons of water that had been suspended levitationally by nature just over our heads.
Yeah, I used to wonder sometimes, you look at a cloud and you have a sense of how massive it is, and you wonder, how is it staying up there?
Yeah.
You know?
And the simple answer to any problems in nature is that it is in balance. It is in harmony with itself and its surroundings. It is, in a word that we use quite often, it's in a resonance. Mm-hmm. When you get into the resonant frequency of your surroundings or with yourself, then you you have the power then to do whatever you want to do or whatever you need to do.
On the other hand, when we are mad, when we are afraid, when we are in any kind of way anxious, on alert, on guard, feeling vulnerable, we're not in a harmonious state, and therefore that power is now, well, not available. It's been shut off. And it bears stating here right now that we have the power. We can decide what to be angry, upset, afraid, feeling vulnerable. We have the power to decide what that is for us. Now, we may be suggested, certain things may be given to us informationally to say, well, you ought to be concerned about this. But ultimately, if you are and do feel afraid, concerned, anxious, etc., in some kind of way disruptive, then you're not in harmony. And it's possible for all of those external conditions to exist and you still be harmonious within yourself. Because when you are harmonious within yourself, when you are therefore unaffected by the exterior conditions, at which point you have the ability to affect the exterior conditions. You have the ability to change the exterior conditions if you are in a harmonious state within yourself.
So I decided that I would just keep focusing on magnetism, because it's the air we breathe. Every time we breathe in, we're bringing in magnetic energy, and our body is composed with a magnetic field around this vessel, this water vessel, really, that we call a body. And it goes on forever. There's no end to magnetism. It's the life force of the multiverse. I used to call it God when I was a kid. I thought, that must be God, because it's everywhere and does everything and so well. So I set on a path. I set myself on a path that would lead me to a place where I could be of value and of service to mankind. Whether they knew it or not, or liked it or not, didn't matter. I just wanted to be effectively, have them smile when I leave, or not throw rocks at me about my philosophy.
I've had the sense of wanting to leave the place in a better state than it was before I passed through. You know, simple as that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the same page. Mm-hmm. So I excuse me, eventually going through all the challenges of the third dimension. That's what I've learned to call it. I like that, because dimensionally we have the ability to change any state of mind or consciousness or even state of being that we want. It's at our will. We have choices. We've been given choices. Mm-hmm. So I don't restrict myself to being a third dimensional being. I've always felt I was in tune with many other dimensions, the animal kingdom, the bug kingdom, oh my gosh, there's so many multi-dimensions. So I felt, after surveying and talking to people, that they live out of only 5 senses, only the seeing, breathing, I don't know what they are anymore. But
I lost track of them too. Something seeing, feeling, smell, touch, and taste.
Yeah. And that contributed to what I called a box in those days. And later on, I found out that people had been calling that a box. And I said, well, that's a good tool I could use. Just say, get out of the box. Start thinking of yourself differently and being who you are. And you don't have to really learn anything more, because academically, the more you learn, the more you have to learn to keep up with your learning. But what you have to do is stop learning and remembering who you are. Go back in time and space, if you want to use that term, to remembering who you are. You're a magnificent creative being that's been given everything in the multiverse. There's nothing you haven't been given. It's how you've been trained, told, programmed to use them that has been awry, and we've gotten buried so deeply in that technology or those ideas or religions that we can no longer see. We've lost sight of who and what we are. Mm-hmm. And you concur with that, honey?
Thank you.
This is Marcia, my love, my best friend, actually. My best friend I've ever had in my life. And we've been spiritual brothers and sisters for ages. And when my wife died, who Marcia married us, that's another story, but when my wife died, I came back to my best friend, and we decided that she has the same goal as I do. We call it, put different labels on it, but it's the same goal. So I said, well, heck, that's going to be easier with 2 of us walking the path than just one of us.
Well, this is a good time to zero in on a break for a few minutes for a word or two. Give you a chance to get you some chai tea or whatever you do, and then we'll be back as we'll resume this conversation with Ralph Ring. On the other side, as we talk more about the potential, the use, the dynamics of natural law, and seeing the contrast with our world of complexity, our world of objects, our world of effects, and really the beauty of getting back in touch with cause. So I'll take this break. We'll be right back when Talk for Food returns with Adam Abraham and Ralph Ring on Web Talk Radio. Jim Harshman is made to change from water treatment to water transformation technology, having installed a unit from Photonic Water Systems for almost 2 years now. He tells you in his own words what has changed.
Well, here's the problem we had when we built this house in 2005 or 2006. We got it done and found out the water was extremely hard. There was a lot of calcium buildup on the outside of the pool and also into the misters inside the courtyard. And so we know we had an issue with the water right off the bat. So in trying to solve that, this is where we started to play around with the different options that were in the market. Kind of explored what was on the home shows at the different green shows and also home shows that the Phoenix area was having. And it was just a major problem. So we had to get it solved. And we ran into the product and I guess we can't say enough about it. I mean, it took an intolerable scum problem, a white hard water problem, and just neutralize it to where we don't have the buildup anymore. We don't have the buildup on the pool, the courtyard, fountain, or into the various systems that we have, such as your misters and your shower heads. So it's 100% work. Now, how it works, I have no idea, but it's not how it works that I'm worried about it.
Available at photonicwater.com.
We come in all shapes and sizes, but for all our apparent differences, we share an important oneness.
I am my body, not.
Now your child can discover the oneness behind human diversity with I Am My Body, Not from Philos Books. This progressive book written by Adam Abraham helps parents and teachers introduce some of the most basic human concepts and questions. Celebrate the body and the spirit with I Am My Body, Not. Order now, just $19.95 plus shipping and handling.
I Am My Body, Not is available at philos.com. That's PHAELOS.com. Order yours today.
Hi, this is Mary Meadows, and you're listening to Talk for Food on webtalkradio.net.
Second half of Talk for Foods gets started right here and now on webtalkradio.net with Adam Abraham. And we're going to continue our conversation with Ralph Ring. And I'm so remiss that Marcia, his lovely wife, was right there at his side. And it really is a couple, Ralph and Marcia Ring. Also, their website is bluestarenterprise.com. You can see, actually, they're in the process of getting back or putting together, I'd say, a mind trust or brain trust, you might say, that is looking to re-establish. And we'll get more into the craft, the OTC one, because much of this show, in fact, there's very little about it. This is really about natural law. It's really about some things that we do need to consider and to know. It's very, very important. The OTC story is significant, is important, but understanding, self-understanding, actually I feel is more so. And so it's very good, at least in my estimation, that we have this conversation at this time. Anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So let's get started with the second half.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So these insights that you've got, which led you along the way to come up and meet this gentleman named Otis Carr.
Otis Carr, yeah.
And it became two peas in a pod. I mean, how did that play out, and what did you produce from that?
Well, when I haven't always operated on all natural principles because I've had to learn the contrasting differences. I had to learn the dark to appreciate the light. So, but when I was in resonance with myself and learning, I realized that you can create your own realities. You can intend to do something. I gave up wanting a long time ago because it never got me anywhere. And I started intending, and I intended to see freedom for everybody. And I wasn't going to leave this state of consciousness or this planet or whatever you'd like to call it until that came about. And in later years, I got really tired of staying here, so I had to expedite things. But it led me to a realization that things would happen. It would come to me as I balanced within myself who and what I am, and stayed on the concept of there's only one, there's only me, there's only I, there's only us. The oneness of everything, that what was necessary to achieve my intention would come to me. And slowly but surely, the more I got out of the way, that's my personality or ego, the more I would become enlightened by multidimensional feelings and thoughts and ideas coming from all of us, the collective consciousness or the archaic records or whatever label you choose. So it led me to eventually, I went through the war, and I saw the tragedy of the so-called wars and what they did to people, places, and things, and it was a horrific experience that I managed to get through, realizing I was walking through only the valley of shadows, the contrast, because I still had my nature, my knownness, my knowingness that there is only life. There is really no death except in the idea of death. The idea of death makes it so because we create it. So I moved on, and I eventually wound up working for a government-funded research and development laboratory. Why and how they hired me still remains a mystery because I had no academic credentials to present. I was applying for a laboratory technician position in a place called Advanced Kinetics. It was located in Costa Mesa, California. And I got the job. I went in and nobody was there, and I finally wound up talking to the director because he was having his lunch, and he said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "I'm looking for a job." "What are your credentials?" I know natural law. I know magnetism very well, and I know how to put magnetism to good use for everybody. That caught his interest enough to say, "Well, we just lost an engineer that was working on one of our projects, and the position's open but are you an engineer?" And I, "No, I'm just me. I'm just," and he said, "Well, the position here is for a laboratory technician, and let me hear you talk about your ideas on magnetism for a bit." So I gave him some examples on magnetic energy, enough so that he said, "You're hired," without even filling out an application. They hired me, turned me over to the supervisor, and he showed me what my job was. The job was relatively simple, but totally complex to me, but it was to fire an electron through a magnetic field without deflection, so that the electron would go through the field. And I had at my bench a high-powered camera and a super Xerox camera to film each and every shot. And at the end of the day, I wrote up my report on all the deflections that happened during the day. But the other side of me, the I that is I within me, looked at this and said, this is ridiculously, this is complex, this is, in fact, why is this happening? Well, and I said, I can get that electron through that field instantly, there's no problem. Because they're trying to use force, and the more force, and they told me to keep increasing the Gauss so that I could get this electron through the field. And I said, this is, you'll never get it through. You're fighting against the laws of nature. I didn't talk to them about this, but I felt it within myself. And I said, no, I've had enough of this. I'm going to show them what I know about magnetism and show them how simple it is. And at that time, on the next bench over, they were working on levitation. And I looked at their experiment, and they had a giant coil, which is just a piece of iron with copper windings around it. And they were levitating a steel ball for 3 or 4 minutes and burning these coils out. And I thought, well, geez, why? That's going about it the hard way. Levitation is so natural that almost everybody knows about it, but nobody uses it. Nobody does anything about it. So and they'd burn these coils out, and they'd go into supply and get another one about every 20 minutes. And this was in the late 50s, and they were valued at about $100 a copy. So they were burning up thousands of dollars on these coils every day and not getting anywhere. They get 2 or 3 or 4 inches off the coil and burn up.
That's a government contract.
Yes.
That's that kind of thinking, though. It's just the people's money. What do they care?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I said, well, I'm gonna go home and let them know what I know about magnetism and so forth. And so I did. I went home and I ripped apart an old TV and got a cathode ray tube out and set up magnets. So I had the identical experiment for about $20. And they told me that the experiment I was working on was like $250,000 worth of equipment. And I was doing it for about $25 because I did the same thing. I set it up the same way. They had it. And I realized the only difference between their way and my way was giving nature a chance to breathe. I mean, even the breath should give us some example of how life works. There's an inner and there's an outer. There's a pulse that goes on all the time, the changing of the tides, the changing of the seasons.
Ebbs and flows, etc. Yes.
And they weren't using it. They were trying to use force. So I said, well, come on, little guy, I'm gonna pulse the signal and give you a millisecond and see what happens. And it was a millisecond or two, or microsecond, I don't even know. And all I did was pulse the signal. And the little electron went right through the field in a vortexial motion, a spiral, without any deflection. And I said, well, of course. You gave the little guy a chance to be who he was. He was a little being that wanted to be who he was. So I wrote up the experiment. I took pictures of it, and I thought, man, I'm going to get a raise. We can get a new house someday or something. I mean, I was just kind of thinking. I wasn't really that bad, but I thought I'd get a raise. And then I had some time to, I think it was out of the same television, use this 15-inch woofer speaker that I put on this was on my living room floor. That was my laboratory in those days.
Sure, of course.
And I hooked up a little audio amplifier that I picked up for about $25 at a garage sale or yard sale. And I started playing around with the vibrations, and the cone would vibrate. And I put different objects in it, and they would move up and down. I could get them to chatter and stuff. And then I just came to me, that when you're thinking along natural lines, if things come to you, you don't even have to look so far to find them. Use a ping pong ball. So I got a ping pong ball, and I set it in the center of the cone and dialed it in, and wow, right away, almost, it levitated. And I said, oh boy, I couldn't hear any sound because I was up, I don't know, 28 hertz. I'm not sure where I was, but I was up in where I couldn't hear it, but it was levitating the ping pong ball.
You're listening to Talk for Food on web at talkradio.net. You may be looking at it as well. You may be listening over iTunes, but wherever it is and however you're getting it, this is Adam Abraham. We're talking with Ralph Ring, a pioneer on a different plane, who worked with Otis T. Carr in the 1950s, built a craft that very much would be likened to a spacecraft, something that we think in general we don't have the ability to do, but in fact we've had that ability and knowledge to do for quite some time. The question is the consciousness, and Ralph is describing, and he is the embodiment of the consciousness that makes safe and effective and real travel beyond the gate, if you will. We're going to get into that barrier too soon. And it's worth noting what the mindset, because we tend to think of people being at a state of some elevated being, when in fact it's about getting and being down to earth and being very common, very human, which Ralph is the epitome of that as well. Let us continue.
I found that if I give a little background on it, it makes more sense when people can put it together themselves.
Yeah, it's context. It's good. Just go with the flow. I want to, and I remember you talking about natural law, or at least mentioning it, but I'd like to actually even go into some of the things that distinguish natural law versus what we're used to. I mean,
sure.
Yes, I want you to talk about some of that too.
Good. I'm glad you asked that question, because we've collectively summed all the laws up into one law. There's only one law that if you use your imagination, you can see the rest. It's the principle. There goes a quail, too. I haven't seen quail around here. We're getting some quail. Good.
Cool. Uh-huh.
Sorry. And that law, and this is completely natural, it's the simple law of what you sow is what you reap. Mm-hmm. What goes around comes around. So whatever you do with yourself, and it doesn't pertain to being told what to do or listening to anybody else but yourself, is what you're going to get back. Mm-hmm. And so in natural law, whatever you intend to do, if you do it from the spirit of your heart, if you love your work, if you use the guidance of feeling good about what you're doing, this will continue to guide you along those steps. A simple formula that one can use is they can feel good when they wake up and say, oh God, it's a beautiful day. Or they can say, oh God, it's not a good day. And that alone will set your day. Because if you know nothing about the universe or how it works, or the multiverse or how it works, or the mind and how it works, we do know that the subconscious mind never rests. It knows everything. It's sometimes related to or a part of the superconscious mind, which I can't get into because I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But that means whatever you say, it will honor you and do it. If you say, I can't, it will say, okay, you can't. Give it up. Forget it. Go. And it will stay that way until you finally say, well, I can. And it'll say, okay, you can do it. It's just a simple yes or a no, a yay or a nay in your conscious expressions of yourself. If you want something, again, this is showing natural law against the invented laws, I should say, the humanoid laws that have been created. If you want something, you're going to always want something. it will want, just like academia has been to me. I did get into academia. I was going to be a marine biologist and an oceanographer, and I saw the more I learned, the less I wanted to do the job, because they kept me wanting, and I wasn't getting anywhere.
You can see what Ralph is talking about in the current discussions about gun control and the Second Amendment. People are choosing sides and deciding what they want to push for or push against. We want to control using these human or man-made laws as them having some dominion over human behavior, and so we want to use those laws to enforce behavior as opposed to interacting with each other naturally, humanely, so to speak. We want to keep our positions and let the laws do our work for us. And what happens is that all sides of the discussion find themselves unsatisfied. No one is happy. The gun controllers, the self-amendment, the Second Amendment people, no one is going to be happy with the solution because they're not comfortable that everyone is obeying, quote unquote, the law. Or the law is not adequate, or the law is adequate but not being observed or respected. So it's not to say that these laws are contrived with any type of malice or forethought, but they do distract people from what is implicit, what is natural, and what is in fact absolute. And that is, or those are, the laws of nature. You could say the laws of the Creator, the laws of the universe. Those are universal laws that, he said, what goes around comes around. That's universal. That's simple, and you don't get around it. You can't get around it. We can ignore it, but actually not usurp it.
So I just put on an aqualung and a mask and a snorkel, and I went and learned everything I needed to know about the underworld, the water world, marine life that I cared to know about at that time. And I learned it very quickly. Within a few years, I knew everything that enabled me to start a diving business. So it's academia compared to, or versus remembering who and what we are. We are a creative being that, and I learned this at the same laboratory, incidentally. A friend of mine was working on an electron microscope, and we were having lunch, having a sandwich together, and he says, "Come on, I set this rig up for you. I want you to look in." He set this little rig up so I could stick my finger underneath the lens of the microscope. Mm-hmm. And I did, and he says, "Well, what do you see?" And I said, "Well, there's nothing there." And he kept pushing my finger back and forth. And he said, "What do you see?" And I said, "Nothing. There's just energy. It's just a bunch of whirling molecules in there and stuff." And he said, "That's right. That's energy. That's all you are, is energy. Your perception of anything else is erroneous. It doesn't exist. You are an energy being." And that, I understood what he was saying on a different level, but it was new to me that a scientist would be telling me that I'm just energy. And he says, being energy, you can't be created or destroyed. You go on forever. Mm-hmm. So the idea that you're anything different is erroneous, and you have to look deeper to see who you are, what you are, and take it from there. So anyway, getting back to the story of the meeting with Otis Carr, I took my experiments, I wrote them up, and I took pictures of the experiments, and I took them into Dr. Weinhardt. He was the director. And I said, "I think I've solved the electron problem, no problem, and the levitation, no problem. And if there's any more around here, I think I can give you an easier slant." And he said, well, I knew when I talked to you, you knew a lot about natural laws. And it's by using common sense versus force, working with the laws instead of against them. And I said, yeah, that's it. He said, well, what have you got there? Let me see. And I showed him. He said, oh, no, we can't go there. He says, now, I'm a physicist, and he's a well-known physicist. He was. And I see where you're at here. You've gone beyond our parameters of science in this dimension. And I said, well, what does that mean? I said, it's just natural. And he says, well, Ralph, there's something you don't understand. This is a government-funded research and development laboratory. And we're paid here to look for answers, but not find them. Which, that remark, it just stunned me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Stunned indeed. We're all finding ourselves stunned as we begin to see what is hiding in plain sight. The fact that our institutions, our scientific efforts, which all appear to be so sincere, which all appear to be so pointed toward the truth, are actually a sham. They are an act. They're just movement. They're not in, well, you can say they're not in integrity, but it's part of, they become the problem. Not even part of the problem, they become the problem, because the progress that we think we are making, we actually are not. This is happening in so many parts of our society today, where we are making these valiant efforts to achieve this goal. On the surface, in the appearance, to achieve these goals to better man, for the betterment of humanity. That's the statement, that's the rhetoric, because there's no substance underneath it. In fact, the actual activities are counter to that. Ralph saw, as a young scientist in this, or a young engineer, that the efforts to make these changes, to get these discoveries, were all just motion. Might as well have gone to central casting and been on a set of a movie, of a production. That's happening all throughout society, all throughout life, except that our lives, the quality of our lives are at stake. The harmony of our lives are at stake. We are not paying by deaths and that's why we started this show in saying we are energy. You cannot die per se, but you can be disturbed energetically. You can be out of harmony. You can be out of sync and out of balance. That you can be. And when you are out of harmony, out of sync, and out of balance, misaligned, you are stuck. We, humanity, are stuck. And I'm not saying this as a collective, because you, as a sovereign being, are free. And it's not that we as humanity are stuck and cannot be free, but it happens as each one of us realize who we are and free ourselves. Take that to the bank. You can do that. You're going to hear more of Ralph Ring in the next edition as we continue this journey, because I've run out of time. But if you got any questions, comments, or suggestions, go to philosopher.com, visit Thought for Food, send me an email, say hello, let me hear about it. Until next week, though, be well, be yourself, be not just in love, but be love. And be back here when Talk for Food returns on webtalkradio.net. Take care. Thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next week.
Talk for Food is a Philos Media Works